My privilege to welcome our esteemed Rosh Yeshiva here tonight, Rabbi Belsky and Rabbi Feldman, who are here to answer all of the questions that have been bothering you for the whole year. This is your chance.
Correction,
Some. The ones that have been censored. No, all of the questions. We're going to try to get to all of them. So we have some here. Unfortunately, we've lived through very, very terrible tragedies recently. And the question is, what should we teach our children? What is appropriate that we can talk to our children regarding these tragedies in Eretz Yisrael? And how do we break it to them? What do we tell them? Whoever would like to take it.
I have question is, how do we tell children about the tragedies that happened? A neighbor who went to shul in the morning and was cut down by an axe or by a gun, by an Arab. Grown-ups need to be taught how to digest such a tragedy. But the only way for children and for grown-ups is a way that one of the widows responded, and my family responded when she found out that her husband was shot. She said, well, he says, everything has an end, and everything is decreed by Hashem. I guess not, it was the time for my husband to leave. Everything is considered in Hashem mind, not everybody lives forever. Some people die earlier, some people die later. And that particular case, I remember one girl saying that I'm really the comment that someone could die that way. Kiddush Hashem in shul while he's davening the Talis and Tefillin. But the main thing is to impress upon children that everything is in Hashem mind. Life is given, and death is given, at the right time, and Hashem runs the world. It's the only way. And that's how we overcome all tragedies and all traumas. And we have the Tachlis that Kosh Baruch Hu runs the world. I think that's the only way. Child may be frightened, maybe his time came. But you have to tell him that Kosh Baruch Hu gives life, and does Hashem make all other children who grow up to be like live a normal life for everyone else, but they have to know that Kosh Baruch Hu is in charge of life and death. I think that's the way it has to be taught to children and to grown-ups.
Question is, what should we teach our children in Chutz La'aretz regarding Shemitah? Shemitah, what is...
You know, there's a klal, we say a kodshin, but it applies to many other things. It's Zois Torah So'oilo, Kolois Torah So'oilo, Kilu Hikri Fo'oilo. There's a big chiluk of the Torah that we can't be Makayim, for many reasons. Perhaps we don't need the Beis HaMikdash to be Makayim, the dinam of Tzaras. But the halachas, we have to know who the true kohen is. There are many halachas that were Mekayim, and that includes all of Torah mitzvahs, that were Mekayim through Limud HaTorah. Kol Oisik B'Toras, Oilo Kilu Hikrivoil. Those who are fortunate to be able to be Mekayim the mitzvah of Shemitah in Eretz Yisrael have a lemaisa, take a hands-on kiyum where they're actively also in it. Those who are outside of Eretz Yisrael have just a little bit. We know that there are certain isurim that apply to foods that are brought to Eretz Yisrael. There's biur, there's nevad and nishmar perhaps, and a whole bunch of other things. But the malachas and Shemitah, we can't be Mekayim because it's only if you're there that there's Shayach Hakim. L'maisa, we should put in a lot of effort into learning the halachas, learning ourselves, giving it over to the children, and they'll be Mekayim the mitzvah of Shmita, and will be Mekayim perhaps to a certain degree the mitzvah of Shmita, but learning and being goisik the Torah's Shmita, and it will be Kilu Hikriv. And of course, it goes without saying that helping those who are Mekayim Shmita by giving up their karka and putting aside the work that they're doing is a tremendous chelik, and that's possible for everyone, including children. It's a key, and it's a recognition of Kil Hashem Ha'oretz, and that we have to constantly remind ourselves. The problem in Eretz Yisrael is that a good many Yidden who live in Eretz Yisrael we cease to be aware of that Hashem Ha'oretz, and they have to be constantly reminded of that.
How do we explain to our children in a way they will understand that all the wonderful, in quotes, technology devices that everyone has they're not good for them?
No.
I think it's the way we explain that is part of a general form of chinuch that we have to give our children. It's not just an isolated case of this gadget, that gadget, this phone. It's that Jews have another tafkid in life besides talking on the telephone. Our tafkid is to learn Torah, tafkid is to do chesed, to do mitzvahs. This takes us away from our tafkid. We're not goyim. It's important to impress upon the child while you're raising him. We're not goyim. The Jews don't act this way. We act differently. We have a different goal. Someone just told me, he's Isaac in Kyoto at the Beijing convention, someone told me that it's difficult lately to get a young man to spend a Shabbos. Used to be they can invite someone for Shabbos. And during Shabbos he'd experience a Shabbos, he'd experience get away from his environment. It would be a hashbod to be able to come to Yishkai. He says lately, he says it's difficult to get people to come to spend the Shabbos for the simple reason that they don't want to have to give up their telephone for 25 hours. Remarkable. The whole world is addicted to a telephone. Having to talk on the telephone. It's sort of a blockage, a mental blockage that people have. It doesn't permit them to think. It doesn't permit them to have conversations. It doesn't permit them to live and do anything without being distracted. It's a klolet. It's a universal, international klolet. I have to tell them the Jews don't live that way. We don't live with distractions. We live with learning Torah. We live with doing chesed. We live with having conversations with people. You can't live with this. I think there has to be a national campaign in all day schools telling people the Jews don't live with telephones. We have to get rid of this whole scourge. It's destroying our lives like it's destroying the Goyim's lives. It's destroying the Jewish lives, especially the Torah life. So I think it's a part of an overall educational campaign which tells people that we have not just the negative of the telephone, but we have positive things to do for which we don't have time to speak on the telephone.
Yeah, I'd like to add to those wonderful words of Baltimore Rosh Hashiva. Now, I remember my father, Sechel Rocha, once saying that it says, Vayashke Mikemel Ganeda is a Kruvim, Veis La Tacher, Vamisapeches, Ushmor is there, Chetzachai. The sharp edge of the sword that turns to guard the path to the tree of life, to the Yitzchak. And he said that the Torah is a Yitzchak. However, anything could be misused and turned into a weapon of destruction. Take a look at a cherif. You could do a multitude of mitzvahs with the cherev. Shchita, bila. You could do terrible affairs with the cherev. So the cherev is possible to turn one way and to turn the other way. The kruvim, interesting, had the faces of gentle little children. But in Gan Eden, because of the chet of Adam Rishon, so Rashi says by the kruvim, Malachei Chabola. The beautiful, gentle kruvim became Malachei Chabola. You're able to use modern technology in a wonderful way. The other day I had a mimer that I couldn't find a source for. So somebody told me, give me a second, I'll Google it up for you. And there it was on the screen. So we used it to find the mocker and many other things. We do that all the time. But the very same instrument could be used for entertainment, which is almost always destructive. You have to entertain yourself with the garbage that's available on the electronic devices. But if it's used to find information that's helpful for Kedusha, for the Torah, it's not over my mind. It's a lot acher, and you've got to be very, very careful. Just like Adam Rishon, who had the Eitz Chaim and the Eitz Adas right next to each other. And the Forshim talk about how could it be B'Soich Agon, if Toich means the middle, there's only one point, which is the center. So it's a center for both simultaneously. And you got to be extremely careful. If not, you're overwhelmed by the Nisoyen of Hatero Isha, Ki Toiv Eichel Macho, Nechmod Lahaskil, Tavo Puim Loinai. So, this ain't like anything else. You can use a car to do horrible things, and you can go to the yeshiva and go to do mitzvahs. Nobody thinks that we got to get rid of cars because they're destructive. When the wild youngster drives down the street with a gleam in his eyes, so we just keep out of the way as far as we could. That's all.
Thank you. Mashiach question. In dealing with chutzpah, what is the balance in setting boundaries without distancing the child?
No. It's something that you have to deal with all the time. When a child asks a kasha, and there's a little of a challenge in this kasha, and that challenge could be sensed within the words of the child and his attitude as being a chutzpah act. But nevertheless, we always tell him, oh, what a wonderful shadow it is, it's marvelous. You said like this, and you said like that, and you touched upon this important. In fact, you know something? This week's Seder addresses the question of chinuch in its most basic and all-inclusive form. The Kineged HaBod in Divrei Torah. You have the Tam T'Shem, the Elishol, the Rasha. The Chacham, somebody once said, has to wait till Parshas V'Chanan, because the Chacham doesn't ask until he learned quite a bit. But the Torah tells us how to address all the people, even the Rasha. V'oya ki yomer alechem b'neichem moav v'yezok tzlechem v'amartem zevach pesach hu Hashem asher posach al botem Yisrael b'tzayim. But you got to tickle his interest a little and get him to be willing to respond and get him to tone down his challenging voice. You do it with love. If the child is yours, you'll figure out what to do.
I like that to consider words, profound words. There might be something, the reason why chutzpah perhaps has increased in the most recent times, the last generation, is because respect is not part of the vocabulary anymore. A few years ago, I had the privilege, I don't know how you describe it, I was chosen to be part of a group that visited President Bush. So we were waiting in one of the rooms in the White House, and one of the aides told us, fellas, I'd like to tell you something before the president comes in. Please, I apologize to you, but I have to tell you this, because this is how it's done in the White House. Well, listening, what is this? What's he going to tell us? He says, when the president walks in, everybody has to stand up. That was the chiddush that he told us. So that's the Goyish culture. There is no such thing as kavod for a president. I'm just as important as you. I could be elected a president like you. Why should you tell me what to do? So in a democratic society, chutzpah is normal because there's no kavod. Our way of life is based on kavod. There's kavod. There's things that you just can't do because that person is more important than you. You have to treat it with awe, with respect. A Sefer Torah, you stand up when the Sefer Torah is taken out, you kiss the Sefer Torah. We have to teach people kavod in a shul. Let children not run around in the shul. Have their affairs, not their affairs for older people. Find them a place to sit, stand up for them. Stand up for parents also. I think children should be trained to stand up for parents when they get old enough. We're missing the whole vocabulary of kavod from our society. The chutzpah is just a manifestation of that. But we have to examine ourselves, and we're teaching our children that there is such a thing as kavod. It doesn't exist. So I think we should emphasize those mitzvahs that depend on kavod. Kavod Elohim, kavod HaTorah, kavod Beis HaKnesses, that it should be part of the natural upbringing of a child. There's just certain things he can't do because it's like kavod is so important. So I think added to that idea of how to treat chutzpah is removing the underlying cause of it all.
The next question centers on going to shul on Shabbos with children. The questioner writes, going to shul on Shabbos should be an enjoyable experience for children, but at some age or point, it has to be more than optional. In general, what age is an appropriate age for a parent to say, quote, you must come to shul if after all the positive reinforcements you've done have not worked?
To bring a child to shul requires, of course, to make him want to come by pulikim. They say that, there are three ways, essentially, to make a kinyan. One is through hagvod, the other one is through mashicha, and there's through chazokah. Chazokah is primarily reserved for the karka, and Bet Chorin is not karka. Tosfos says you want to get a child with chazokah to overpower him, tell him if you don't do this or if you do this, I'll give you a slap. You'll remember it for the rest of your life. He becomes hostile and becomes immunized to any hashpah and to any chinuch. But if you raise him and give him recognition and give him, believe it or not, for a little youngster, some kavod, you could be kind to him, that's hagboah, and draw him gently with mashicha into the right circle. Then you get it. You tell a child that was such a brilliant, wonderful kasha, and tell it over to some relative that walks in. Did you hear? My Yaakov asked this and this. How beautiful. What would you have answered? You're kind of a child by giving him the recognition and the chashivas that it will ennoble his life. And little by little he will be trained and he'll be drawn into the shul and he'll run. But to force it to come is a very dangerous affair. If you have such a problem, then you have Rabbeim and you have Chachamim who you can consult with and take it very slowly and carefully.
just want to add that Belsky forgot to mention one other form of kinyan, which is kesef. In a child's case, shoveh kesef is covered. Giving him a feeling of covet for going to shul. Not that he's forced to go to shul. I know a father was very successful with his children. They're raising his children, and he tells his children when they're small, you're not old enough to go to shul. When you get old enough, I'm going to let you come. And then they yearn for coming to shul. And finally, when they do come to shul, he only lets them stay for 5 minutes. They can say the holidays, then they have to go home. You're not ready yet for more. And slowly, they ask to stay in shul longer because it's a covet for them to be able to stay in shul. And when they don't behave well, they immediately get sent out. You're not behaving properly. If you want to be in shul, you have to behave, you have to daven, you have to sit still. And slowly the children want to stay in shul. Like the beautiful mashal that Belsky gave, chazaka is not a kinyan. But covet is a good substitute for kesef. It's a shoveh kesef. The Kabbalah from the Olam Choshev is considered in the Sini. You see, it's called shoveh kesef covet. And we have to train our children slowly in feeling that going to shul is a chulik thing.
The next question concerns what a program would look like for boys aged 17 to 22 who are still Shomer Shabbos and going to work or college in order that they have a chevra. What would that program look like to the Rosh Yeshiva?
Well, they have institutions like that. Both of them in New York. You have Landis College. You have places where we don't have a school yet for vocational, for teaching people trades, which we, I think, should have. But you have places where people have, like Landis College or other place like that, where they study for professional, a major part of the day, and the learning for a minor part of the day. Just keeps them within the fold, it keeps them in a firm atmosphere. I think that's a solution to that type of one.
It becomes sometimes complex. You have to be able to show the bocher that what he doesn't remove him from the higher Torah society. If he's able to learn an hour or two a day or less or more, and treat it with, like we said before, the chashivas and the covet, and then at the same time find him a society, a group, or today they have Bata Midrasha, and they have chaburas, and they have many different forms of finding others who could have a chabura, a class. I know of a whole bunch of different fellows who give shiurim to college students or to workers. It's an important thing. It's sometimes ignored simply because today there's a certain assumption, which by the way wasn't around when I was a youngster at all, is that anybody who doesn't learn until he's married and until a couple of years after he's married is somehow an inferior person and a failure. And that's very devastating. There are plenty of people who just can't do it, and they shouldn't be doing it because they're wasting their time. But the others have to have something that is dignified and it recognizes their share in a higher spiritual life and Torah, and you give them material and chaver. There are programs here and there, and you say that here in Baltimore, there is in New York, there definitely is all different kinds of... I'd like to speak with the organizations that are quite aware of these things and will direct the person to the right place and to be able to find just exactly the thing that will give them chaverim and rabbeim and hashpah, which is essential to his lichnistic development.
The next question is, I'm going to add to it, why is there so much machlokas amongst the Yidden in Eretz Yisrael? I would just broaden it and say, why is there so much machlokas in the Yidden everywhere?
Let me say one thing, I'll leave 90% up to Feldman. You know, and everybody sitting here knows, that machlokes could be used as a tool for deeper understanding. First thing, when you're a real youngster, you discover that Abaye says Yushla Das Lo Yavi Yish, and Rava says Yushla Das Havi Yish, and B'maiko Rifliki, and the different kashas and the different jayas. And finally, when the sugya is finished, even on the lowest level, you understand 100 times more than you did when you started out. Seeing both sides of the question is a tool for getting to the heart of it. If those who have machlokes don't feel that they have to eradicate the other side, and that the other side is chotei b'sheya, it's possible to join together in the search for the truth. It's not always easy, it's not always possible. But that's at least one aspect of machlokes that can be used positively.
I would add that Jews are bali machshor. They have opinions, and they're ready to argue for their opinions, to fight for their opinions. And especially if they believe that their opinion matters for Klal Yisrael, they'll certainly fight for it. That's a source of a lot of machlokes b'Yisrael, is everyone thinking that what he believes is the solution for Klal Yisrael. And of course, no one in such a case would be willing to compromise. If he thinks his solution is going to save Klal Yisrael, why should he compromise? He should invite, he shouldn't compromise. That's a source of a lot of machlokes. When I talk about machlokes between different countries, one's Polish, one's Ungarish, one's Sephardi, Ashkenazi, that's the plural. There's no ideology there. But machlokes in Chassidim and Misnagdim, machlokes between this kind of issue, that kind of issue, these are all based on ideology, a way of learning, a way of arriving at truth. And that's why it's a sign of health, that everyone is really sticking to his ideology, to his opinion. And there has to be a clash between two people who believe that they're 100% right. That's how we have to live with it.
I hold in my hand the last question, apparently written by a Jets fan. Living here in the United States exposes our children to the extreme pastime of following sports. Is this permissible?
Okay, there are two levels of following sports. Of course, we're not talking about playing sports, that good exercise, etc. But following means having, being a fan. A fan, by the way, is such a status of a fanatic. Being, that's where it comes from, believe it or not. A fan saying, what are you? In New York there were 3 teams. I'm a Yankee and I'm a Dodger. And whatever it is, they're not around anymore. But for a little, gentle, superficial, fun, childish interest, it's one thing. Okay, but when you get involved in it, it's not a good thing at all. try to wean people away from it. Somebody tells you this is my favorite player. Okay. And that itself was a chonim, perhaps, because you admire the guy. But they could carry it a lot further and talk about the person. He's so great, he got such a pitching arm or a catching hand or whatever it is. When you involve yourself in it, it pollutes the mind, really. I think that somehow, when there's admiration for a certain yochid, and the kid is going in that direction, you go to the store and pick up 1, 2 beautiful pictures of some tzaddikim in the Yisrael, and get to learn a bunch of interesting stories about them, and get him to be interested and to become a fan of the right kind of people, not the wrong kind of people.
Yeah. The problem is children, you can follow sports, I mean that's part of playing games. Children like to play games, so they like to emulate those who play games. The problem is really grown-ups. Why should a grown-up follow sports? What benefit does he have from it, besides some kind of vicarious feeling of defeating another city, there's another team? It's very, like she says, it's very, very childish. But it hits the front pages of the newspapers. There must be a wide interest in it. But a grown-up should be ashamed of being interested in sports. A grown-up who wasn't interested in going to a baseball game, he should be ashamed of it. It's like when you get down on his knees and play marbles. So they're playing marbles with a ball that's a little thicker than everyone else do. He should be ashamed of it. But if he's not ashamed of it, what can you expect from children? If the children see the parents getting excited about the World Series, what are they supposed to do? So really, it gets down to parents having the right values, what's important in life, what a Jew is supposed to be living for. Supposed to live for ruchnius, for Torah, for mitzvahs, and not for some kind of child's game. Unfortunately, some people never mature, never realize what their lives are all about, and continue being children their whole lifetimes. But we should get rid of the adults getting interested in sports.
I'd like, on behalf of the Tzibor and ChinuchAtzmai, to thank Rabbi Belsky and Rabbi Feldman for coming and answering the questions and gracing us with your presence. It's now my pleasure to call upon Rabbi Eitan Feiner to deliver some remarks. Rabbi Feiner is no stranger to our community, having received much of his formative chinuch here. And then he went on to Eretz Yisrael and now has, the last number of years, been the Rav of the White Shul in Far Rockaway. And as a result of his presence, that shul and that community have experienced a renaissance. Anyone who's heard Rabbi Feiner speak will know that he can speak on any topic, give multiple shurim, and it never ceases to amaze me how excited he remains, and he can give like one after another, and I'm sure you will share that excitement when you hear him. Thank you, Rabbi Feiner, for coming down from New York.
Shus, Choshuva, Rosh Yeshiva Shlita, Morai for Abosai, ladies and gentlemen, it's a gewaltige schus, a tremendous covet to come, not just back to a place that I called home for so many years, having the schus to learn in Yeshivas Nei Yisrael for approximately 8 years, to live in Fountain View on Ford's Lane, and to know so many faces here, and to come back. It's always a tremendous covenant as a chus. I always told my wife, if ever we have to leave Eretz Yisrael, there's only two options, either Far Rockaway or Baltimore. So if I can't have this chus yet of living in Baltimore, the Kol HaPachas, to come back and visit, and especially now, on behalf of ChinuchAtzmai, it's really a chus and a covenant. I thank the Ribono Shel Olam and Avada me umka de libo from the omek of my life. I thank each and every one of you for coming out this evening. So allow me to share with you the following story I heard from one of my brothers-in-law years ago about a young boy named Yankel who wasn't doing very well in yeshiva. They had many discussions between the parents, the Rabbeim, the Anhal of that particular yeshiva, And finally, after seeing a therapist, he was told he has to take Ritalin every single day. And maybe things will gradually improve. So sure enough, the parents told Yaakov, you know what, you're going to start taking this medication. Here are the tablets. I want you to take this medication every single day, Yaakov. Can we trust you? Yes, Tati, Mommy, you can trust me. Me'achos, nothing to worry about. And you're going to take this every single day without fail. Yes, don't worry about it. And sure enough, the medication seems to be working. A week goes by and his grades are going up. His second week goes by and he aces the Chumash quiz. And he gets 100 on the Gemara Bechin and everything is Gavaldik and Limudei Kodesh and he's steiging, he's growing. Mechayel, Achayel. And the year finishes and he has the best report card he's ever had in his history. And the parents take him out to eat and they give him a special celebration with all of his peers. They say, Yaakov, we're so proud of you. You took your medication and look how things changed. And he turns to his parents and he says, Tati, Mommy, what are you talking about? Well, Yaakov, you took that medication that we gave you, the 2 tablets every day. He says, what do you mean? He says, I didn't take it. He says, Rebbe comes into the morning and puts a cup of coffee on the desk when he's about to say the shir. And I take the medication, I put it to my Rebbe's coffee every single morning. And my Rebbe's been a different person ever since. But the Rebbeim have to be geschmack. You have to know how to convey the sweetness, the arevis, the mesikas atayra, the heilig Orachayim, the Orachayim HaKodesh writes in Parshas Kisovo, Perach Vav and Posuk Yad Aleph when the Torah state, V'samachta b'chol hatov. In the second pshat, the Orachayim HaKodesh cites the Gemara Brachos Tafeim and Beis, Ein Tov El Torah Shenamar Ki Lek Yatov Nasati Lachem Torasi Al Tazovu. The greatest Tov in the world is the Tov of the Torah HaKadoshah. And Zog the Heilig Orachayim, if we would taste a bit of the Mesikas and Arevas HaTorah, how you mishtagavu mislatim achara, and all the gold, the kesef, the zov, and the ganze Welt wouldn't interest us 1 iota. If we would understand the chashivas and the gewaldige schus to learn the Torah, to teach the Torah, nothing else would interest us. I heard years ago Rabbi Ephraim Waxman, he said over a Ma'aseh of a Choshev Godol years back, he was marrying off his daughter. And there's all that wasted time, the photographers and the pictures, all the Norishkeit. And he says, you know what? I don't have time for this. I'll tell you what, that was Yotzei Zayin. I took my pictures. I'm going to go into the adjacent room and I'm going to learn. I'm holding in Yavamas. Let me go ahead and learn Yavamas B. And then when it comes time for the chuppah, then you'll give a knock on the door and I'll come and I'll join you for the chuppah. See, Taka gets into a sugya. He's always listening and learning. And there's a knock on the door and his wife comes and says, Ruvain, it's time to walk our daughter down to the chuppah. And he says, "Oy, face me at Sarkid Obon," and closes the Gemara. You taste the Arevas Mesikus, it's the greatest geschmack in the entire world. So David HaMelech already told us that in the holy pages of his Sefer Tehillim. His magnum opus, or Mendel Kaplan, writes that every single word of Sefer Tehillim was written Mila b'Mila Baruch HaKadosh. And in Kapitel Yutes in chapter 19, when David elaborates on the galus of creation of Shemayim Mesaprim, and the galus, the glory and the splendor of the Torah Kadosh, and Perek Yutes, Posuk Yud Aleph of Tehillim, writes David HaMelech that the Torah is Nechmod Kesem Izov Mipazrav, Umesukim Midvash V'Nofesufim. It's sweeter than honey. It's sweeter than honey. It's sweeter than the drippings of the honeycombs. It's the sweetest thing in the entire world. And not just sweet like honey, but it's sweeter than honey, explains the Chavetz Chaim. Besides the Yeduatik of Shatan is Akdama to Likutei Halachos and Kochib. It's also Miyuchas to the Chavetz Chaim that honey, the sweetest entity in the world, the only entity that never naturally spoils. But how much honey can you really consume? I'll give you some honey. I'll give you a teaspoonful, the second one, Nachamol, and the other day you get a little sick of it after a while. Mashek in the Torah is Misukim Midvash V'Nofes. It's even sweeter as like the Heilige Chavetz Chaim Zatzal. You never get sick of the Torah. Rabbi Yoshev and the Yarchan Kol HaTorah talks about Isha, Devash, Gematria, Devash 306, Gematria, Isha 306. You ever wondered, Devarim Gedol Ameir and Mikra, it's not coincidental. Why do so many husbands across the world call their wives honey? Because Isha is Gematria 306 and Devash is Gematria 306. The Torah is even sweeter. The Torah is Mesukim Midvash V'Nofes Sufim Azai State and Tehillim David HaMelech HaPiruch HaKodesh. It's sweeter. It's the sweetest thing in the world. Now granted, Isaac Asimov does write in his Book of Facts on page 93 that everything throughout Scriptures is always described metaphorically sweet like honey, sweeter than honey, because until the Crusaders returned from the East in the beginning of the 12th century, there was no other sweet entity besides honey. Honey was the chief, the cardinal sweetener that they had in the world. So everything sweet was mamela, likened to honey. Now Rashi and the Marikra do write in their respective Perushim. In Shmuel Aleph, we do find that Yedalet Chavav Yaras Davash, the Rashi Marikra say that they had sukkah, they had something called sugar. But our Kol Panim David says, sweeter than sugar, sweeter than honey, the sweetest thing in the world is the Torah. Ad Kan V'Tati David HaMelech. And now we turn our attention to his son, to Shlomo Melech L'Chocham Ikaladom, and the holy pages of Shir Hashirim, the Kodesh Kadoshim, and in Perek Dalet Posuk Yud Aleph, writes Shlomo Melech L'Chocham Ikaladom, that the Torah is Davash V'Cholov Tachas L'Shonech V'Reach Samosayach Kereach Levanon. The Torah is like honey, like cholov, like milk underneath your tongue. Gevaldik, Shlomo Melech, what in the world were you mechadish? Didn't David HaMelech already tell us, Tehillim, Yotes Yud Aleph, that the Torah is Mesukim Midvash V'Nofes? It's not sweeter than honey, than the drippings and honeycombs. Asks the Alumas Yosef, that is the lesser well-known brother of the Heilige Mishnah, Yavitz Rabbi Tzalel Jolti. His brother, back in Tufshin Chamzayin, he wrote a Gevaldige Sefer, Alumas Yosef and the Rambam, and in his one-page introduction, writes Rabbi Aaron Yosef Jolti an interessant kasha. David HaMelech already described the Torah sweeter than honey, so what's the son Shlomo adding that Tavash V'Cholav Tachas L'Shonech? What's Ma'ila Rabusa? Where's the Chiddush of the son? What's he being most of it? Shir Shirim, that is Tati. David already told us in the pages of Tehillim. Explains the Alumas Yosef beautifully. David HaMelech was describing when a person is learning onto himself, onto herself, you got to taste that sweetness, the Geschmack, the Mesikas, the Arevas of Torah. And you have to know, cognizant all the while, that the Torah is Taka Mesukim Midvash V'Nofes. But add Shlomo Melech, the teacher to Klal Yisrael. It's very nice that you tasted the sweetness, but now share it with everybody else. You got to go out and you got to teach the world and share the sweetness of the Torah with the Fraya. You didn't share it with everybody else. David told us, you're right. When you're learning the Torah, bein chol bein atzmcha, you're learning by yourself, but with a charusi, you're right. You tasted it's geschmack, it's takim esukim edashanof esufim. But what about underneath your tongue when you're transmitting it, imparting the Torah to everybody else? Torah has to be luman almanas lelamed. You have to teach it to the ganze Welt. You know, we had many people learning historically. We had a yeshiva, Shem and Aver, that Yaakov learned 14 years without sleeping awake. We had a yeshiva. We had an Oda Marisha, we had a Noach, we had many tzaddikim, the Medrash Rabbah writes at the beginning of Vayikra and Parsha Beis and Os Yud, who learned Torah. They knew Torah, but still, even though they learned Torah, nobody was Makayim Kol Torah Kula until Avram Avinu stepped up to the plate. And the Gemara tells us twice in Shas Kedushin Pebeis and Aleph and Yom Chalchesim and Beis, Avram Avinu Kiyim Es Kol Torah Kula Kodesh Nisna. He kept it all. He appreciated Taryag Mitzvah, but he didn't keep it to himself. What did Avram Avinu do? Let's turn again to places in Shas Sanhedrin. Tzadi Zayim and Aleph and Avodah Zarah Daf Tesem and Aleph Shis Alfi Shon Alviyama. The world was destined from the outset to last a mere 6,000 years. 2,000 years described as Tovavo was utter sheer desolation. 2,000 years of Torah. When did we undergo the change, the shift from Tovavo to Torah? Not with the Torah of Adam, not with that of Noach, not even with that with Chanoch, with Mr. Shalach, and yes, not even that with Shem and Aver. Only until we approached Avram Avinu and he stepped up to the world stage, occupying the spotlight and teaching Torah. Rashi al Pionklus and Avodah Zarah Testament al Teshabidu le'araisa. You're giving over Torah. You're sharing it with the world. That's Avram Avinu. That's when we begin Torah. Because it explains on Moshe Feinstein, the Drash Moshe, Parshas Noach, and there's Ve'idus, V'asifus, and Durish Beis, Menachem Tzvi, and Zaks, and Menachem Tzvi, and others. Yes, many people on the pages of Tanakh learn Torah. but they didn't go out of their way to share it with everybody else. Avraham Avinu is the first one who says, I tasted the geschmack of what Torah is all about. How can I keep it to myself? How can I not share it with all the Freie Yidden in the world? What about everyone who's unaffiliated? What about everyone who has no asaga? No clue what Torah is, what Yiddishkeit is? Let me share it with them. Let me show them the beauty, the splendor, the ziv, the hod, and the hodder. Let me share the geschmack and the arevus and vasikas HaTorah. Avram Avinu, he bedavka is the one to commence the tkufa, the era of Torah, because he said, I'm not going to keep it to myself. I'm going to share it with everybody else. That's when Torah begins, because only that mahalech, that attitude, perpetuates the Torah, the Dorei Doros from time immemorial ad Yom Hazeh. Explains, therefore, the Alumas Yosef, David was talking about when you're learning the Torah's Takim, Mesukim, Midvash, and Ofasuf. But now you got to take that Mesikus, that Arevus HaTorah, and share it with everybody else. Share it with the less knowledgeable, with the unaffiliated, with Freie Yidden, and share it with all those precious Taradik and Neshamas who come to ChinuchAtzmai schools. Go out and share with them, show them the beauty, the Geschmack of Yiddishkeit. As we heard Rosh Hashivas explain, we have to show our children, the youth of today, those especially in their fledgling years, the Geschmack of Yiddishkeit. They got to show them you don't need sports, you don't need that Norishkeit. There's so much Geschmack in Torah, so many Mitzayas at Torah, Chelkei at Torah, but don't keep it to yourself, share it with them. David told us the Torah is Mesukim and Midvash and Ofasuf, and Shlomo the son adds, Drash v'cholav tachas lashonech. It's very geschmack when Rav Huna writes in Pachar Yitzchak and Rosh Hashanah and Maimar Aleph in those bays. Shtei kochos yesh laloshen, writes Rav Huna, you have aspect in number one that anything you taste that's sweet, it's the tongue, that's the aver and the odom that enjoys, savors the sweetness of the candy, of the honey. That's one. The loshen tastes things that are enjoyable to the owner of the tongue. But then there's what? The conveyor, that same tongue is the conduit, is the choice vehicle that could transmit that sweetness, give over the chokhmas HaTorah, give over the geschmack of Yiddishkeit, using that same loshen. This aspect of number one, you tasted the sweetness when you learned, when you went to yeshiva, but I'll share it with the unfortunate, the hapless individuals the world over. And Mefrat and Atzenu HaKadoisha, show them the geschmack of Torah. And Baruch Hashem, we have people in the ChinuchAtzmai schools throughout Eretz Yisrael who are giving over that geschmack, giving over the beauty, the arevus hamasikas HaTorah. Perhaps it's solely alluded to in the famous Gemara in Sukkah Memtes and Beis. Gemara cites the posuk from Mishlei. We say it in Eishes Chayil, Perek Lamed Aleph, and Posuk Chavav. Torah's chesed al l'shona. Frek the Gemara v'chi yesh Torah shechesed, v'Torah sheino shechesed. V'hana the Torah's chesed. Elo, teretz number one, if you're learning the Shema, that's Torah's chesed. Lo l'shema, that's not Torah's chesed. Heba Sema state in the Gemara yet a different mahalech. Torah that you're learning, malamdon, you teach it to others, that's Torah's chesed. If you're not teaching it to others, that's not. What's shot the two Lashonos? Polafi Dibri Halubas Yosef, and based on what we borrowed from Rav Huna, it's very geschmack. Torah's chesed al lishona. They're savoring the Torah. You know when you could savor the Mesikas and Arevus? Only when what? When you're learning lishma, then you taste the geschmack. And that's the highest level of lishma and Torah. We all know the famous introduction. The Sukkot of a Rebbe Nakdom and Egli Tal and the Lavates Melachos and Shabbos. Based on the Zohar Kodesh, and it's of the highest levels of lishma when you're learning for the geschmack in Torah. And it's not as chiddush, it's already brought by the Shlom Mesech HaShavuos, and it's already Merumas and Rabbeinu Avram and Haran and Dormam Chesem and Aleph, the Noé Kitzon Yosef and Simon Chaf Hey, the idea that mitzvahs lav lahanis ninu, but the Torah is given lahanis, the Torah is given for Hana, and the Klei Chendes Marach and Parshas Hazino and the Chuvas Eretz Tzvi in the end of Simon Sadi Beis, they bring rayas to the Eglei Tal, to the Shlom, that is Lishma, taste the Arevus Mesikas, the Geschmack of a Torah is answer number one. The Gemara, that's Torah's chesed. But then the Gemara goes weiter. Because if you enjoy Yiddishkeit, and you've tasted the sweetness of Yiddishkeit, share it with everybody else. If you get something geschmack, a Yid, how could you just keep it to yourself? Go out and share it, especially with the less fortunate, with the Freie Yid, and share it with them. And that's precisely what ChinuchAtzmai is dedicating every ounce of the kochos hanefesh to doing. Sharing the sweetness, the beauty, the splendor, the geschmack of Torah and Yiddishkeit with everybody throughout Eretz Yisrael. But it always intrigued me. Why Chalav? Why is milk mentioned? Milk is not necessarily sweet. And even Rav Reuven Margolios, the author of the Margolios Hayam in Maimer Yudches in the Sefer HaMikra Messiah, who argues with so many of the Rishonim that Eretz Avas Chalav and Vash, the Chalav is not a reference to milk. It's rather a reference to Yayin Lovan, to white wine, which is so rampant and rife throughout Eretz Yisrael. But even he agrees in footnote number 4, he brings this very posik, Dvash v'cholav tachas l'shonech, and he too agrees that everybody is in full consensus that Dvash v'cholav is a reference to milk. Milk is not sweet. What's milk doing here? Perhaps the Fianiyas Daiti, the Mahalach, the approach is as follows. Allow me to take you back to a shmooze that Rav Yitzchak Kunner, the Baal HaPach Yitzchak, delivered on Yom Gimel de Chanukah back in Tufshin Chav Gimel, 52 years ago on the third day of Chanukah, to the Bachrim in Yeshiva of Eastern Parkway. It's printed as the 74th letter in Pachid Yitzchak Igrus Uksav. Rav Huna writes how he met a boy on the street. And he asked this boy, he says, tell me, you're in one of these high schools where you're learning Limudei Kodesh by your Rebbeim, you're learning Limudei Chol, secular studies by your teachers, your professors. Manakudas hachiluk, what's the hevdel b'neim? How do you touch up? What's the difference between your Rebbeim on the one hand and your secular studies teachers on the other? And listen to this Gavaldig Einfeld. This is a high school kid. And listen what he tells the Chaim Berlin Rosh Hashiva 52 years ago. Says, Rebbe, I'll explain. Says, you can have a chef who's cooking for hundreds of students in a yeshiva in a dormitory, and he's collecting and consolidating external ingredients, and he's putting together various concoctions until he presents a chicken soup, a potato kugel, a cholent. He presents it for the bachrim in the yeshiva. But it's all completely external. It exists outside of him. Says, when my Rebbeim are teaching me Torah, it's like a mother nursing her newborn infant. Because when a mother gives over the milk, it's not simply an external ingredient. On the contrary, it's something internal. It's a chelik mi'atzmiyusa, a chelik be'etzem mi'pinimiyusa. It's coming from her internal place. And she's giving a chelik of her pnimis because she's giving something that's part and parcel of who she is. She's giving over her milk to that child because she says, child, I'm giving you my love. I'm giving you a piece of me in the process. It's coming from the pnimius. Masha'enkin, my secular studies teachers, very nice. They went to school. They have a master's degrees, perhaps PhDs, and they're consolidating and amassing reams of information, myriad pieces of data, and all they're doing is presenting it, but it always remained completely external. And Dr. Hurno Weiter, based on this mashal, when a chef is cooking in a kitchen, it doesn't make a big nafkamina, not a huge difference whether there are 10 boys in the yeshiva or 100 or 1,000. It's just a matter of accumulating more diverse ingredients quantitatively. Masha'enkin. When a Rebbe is teaching a Talmud, it doesn't matter whether there are 10, 20, 30 Bachrim. The Rebbe is teaching each one as an individual. Just as a mother can have so many children, she's nursing each child individually. She's addressing each child individually. The Rebbe in my yeshiva, that's the vart he gives over the Abba to each and every yochid. A Yesod, Rav ChinuchAtzmai Zatzal, the famed Talmud Muvak of the Chavetz Chaim Zatzal, writes in the new edition of Kovetz Mamorim and Chelik Gimel Daf Reis Samach Tes, page 269, writes Rav ChinuchAtzmai, the Yesod Godo B'Yoser and Chinuch is give over the Abba, give over the love, give over the Geshmak. And if you're teaching 10 Talmidim, you're not giving one collective, overflowing and overwhelming love to them all simultaneously. No way, you're giving over the Ava, the Kol Yochid V'Yochid. You're loving them each 10 times. You're loving them each as individuals, and you're giving them over a piece of yourself. In other words, milk from a nursing mother, whether it's milk from a cow or a goat, milk is something that is produced internally. And like the Alumas Yosef, it's very geschmack. As Rav Aaron Yosef Jolti explains, Shlomo the son added Dvash v'cholav tachas l'shonech. Give over that sweetness of the Torah, the beauty, the splendor, the geschmack of Yiddishkeit. Give it over, so that's already conveyed in the opening word of Ash. What's he adding? Chalav. Lefinias Taiti, it's also here what? Chalav doesn't appear in David's statement because David was talking about when you're learning, and Chalav isn't sweet, Batsan. You know what Shlomo's adding when you give over the Torah? Give it over by Bechinas Chalav. Give over as if you're giving over a piece of yourself in the process. Devash v'cholav tachas l'shonech. Give over all of you. That's Torah's chesed. That's devash v'cholav tachas l'shonech. That's Rav Hunder's message to these Bochum and Yeshiva in Eastern Parkway. That our Rebbeim give over a piece of themselves in the process. You grew up from, you grew up perhaps fry, and now you became a Baal Tshuva. You tasted Torah, you tasted Maharals and Ramchals and Rabbi Kivegers and Mashals, Rishonim, Achonim, Tanakh with Meforshim, and Siddur, Perushat Tfilu with Meforshim, and Machshav and Chasidus. Maybe you dabbled a little bit in Kabbalah, and you learned so many Geshmakas farm. Torah is saturated, inundated with so much Geshmak. You can't keep it to yourself. You have to give it over to others and share it with the Ganze Welt and give over a piece of yourself in the process. And that's exactly what they're doing all over Eretz Yisrael. Giving over the love of Torah and the love of Yiddishkeit to young boys and young girls growing up in Freie homes. And yes, it's Gavaldik in Eretz Yisrael. The government is covering the tuition costs. But in the end of the day, what's that going to do for you if you have no way of getting to the Beit Sefer, have no way of getting to the yeshiva? Without Keren HaSaot, how are the young, precious Haradik and Neshamas, how are the young boys and girls? They're looking, they have the right to Rebbeim, they have the right to Anholis, they have Moradik Yeshivas starting in the holiest place on the planet, that they want nothing more to give over B'Bachinas T'cholav, a chelik of the Pnimius of the Rebbeim, and they want to give over the Geschmack of Yiddishkeit, but they need to be there, they need to be in attendance. And without us opening up our hearts, our Pnimius Alev, and opening up our wallets here tonight, how are they going to get to school? How are they going to make it back from school? 19,800 young boys and girls. But it doesn't end there. Because you see, there are quotas in the various schools, and if you can't put 20 children in a classroom, then it's going to affect in excess of 30,000 young boys and girls who would not be able to have that Torah, the Yiddishkeit education. Because they too will not have classes. If we can't get those young boys and girls from cities all over Eretz Yisrael, and we can't get them to the yeshivas, to the Botei Sefer to learn Torah, and to taste the ever geschmack and sweetness of Torah and Yiddishkeit, Torah mitzvahs, it's going to affect way more than 19,800, way in excess of 32,000. Grew up, one of my favorite commercials, and I guess I'm an avid fan because I still drive Hondas today. But I grew up when the commercial, their slogan was years back, Honda Accord, the car that sells itself. V'havdol alfei avdolos, the Torah sells itself. And ChinuchAtzmai sells itself. ChinuchAtzmai should not need parlor meetings. ChinuchAtzmai should not need to ever go around and ask anyone. Because as the Gedolei Yisrael have told us from the days of Rav Aaron and Viter, this is something we all have to have ishtadvus. How could you not want to have a chelek? And spreading that beauty, the splendor, the geschmack, the arevus and mesikas hatayra. How could you not want to share it with all these beautiful, precious neshamas? They're changing their families and extended families in the process. They're changing the face of Eretz Yisrael. And l'maisa l'kushta, they're also changing the face of God's Klal Yisrael. You don't want a chelek in that. We don't need to come and ask for money. This is a given. This is the Moisad that sells itself. You hear the words ChinuchAtzmai, the wallet's got to get opened. $36 a month, $400, $32 a year. It doesn't have to stop there. You don't want a chelik in their Torah. Allow me to close with the following Maisa. I just heard the Maisa earlier this evening. It's a Peladik Maisa, and I know that on my ride home tonight, this Maisa will not be leaving my heart and my mind. It's a story of a boy named Donnie. Donnie grew up in a completely free home, father, mother, not religious, bechlal. Sent to a ChinuchAtzmai school, he started tasting the geschmack of Chumash. A posuk, a word in Torah Seinu HaKadoshah. Ramban in his Akdama to Torah Kulan Shmaisav Shal Kodesh Ruch he tasted the sweetness of every precious word in the Torah. And his father was completely adamant. He said, Donnie, I don't want you to bring the Yiddishkeit in the home. No Shabbos, no Yontif, whatever you learn in school, Beseder. But I don't want it in the house. It stays outside the home. But Donnie fell in love with the Torah. And every single day in his lengthy journey to yeshiva, there and back, he would think about that week's parsha. He would think about all the morsels of wisdom that his Rebbe had imparted. But Bechinas Tacholav, the Pinimiyas Alev, the Rebbe gave over a part of himself. Gave over the Torah like the mother nursing the child. And Donnie was instantly hooked, and he loved the Torah, and he loved the Parshas HaShavua. And he would come home, and his father said, Donnie, it's very nice, it stays out of the home, I'm not interested. Yes, I'll make the Kiddush in a monotonous fashion, I'm not interested. Okay, the mother would hear a little bit, the word of Torah. He would write every day another Dvar Torah, another another idea, until he filled an entire notebook of his own thoughts, his own horrors, his own insights. This boy, precious Neshama Dani, filled up a notebook of his Chinuchei Torah. He was only a bacher, 12 years old at the time. And he has now a notebook of Chinuchei Torah, Bereshis Shmos, V'chola. He loves the Torah. He writes about it and he thinks about it the whole way there and the whole way back. And his Rebbe knew that at home, Donnie's bar mitzvah wouldn't be celebrated to his liking. After all, the parents said, yeah, we'll have this type of reception, we'll play this type of music, we'll have these crafts and these various games going on, and Donnie knew that wouldn't be an emes bar mitzvah. So the Rebbe thinking says, you know what, Donnie, I'm going to give you a very special bar mitzvah gift. I'm going to take you to a one-on-one with the Goda Hador of Chaim Kanevsky Shlita. And we're going to go in together. Donnie was so excited. We talked before about Kinyonim, Kinyan Kesef, as the Rosh Hashiva pointed out. You know what? Sometimes when a Bocher gets to Bar Mitzvah, you can have all the candy, all the honey, all the devash, and all the sweetness. And you could give him money, mitoch shalolish mabolish mabsochim davnunim and alf, and you could give him all the geschmack. But a chance, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to sit one-on-one with the Gold Hadar. Donnie was so excited. He says, Rabbi, can I bring him my notebook of Chinuch? He says, Amana, bring him your notebook of Chinuchei Torah. The Chinuchim of a 13-year-old boy in a ChinuchAtzmai school with Friar parents who had no interest whatsoever in any word of that notebook. And the Donnie turns to his father and he says, Abba, please, can you join me? We have a meeting tomorrow night, 10:30 p.m. by Rav Chaya Kanievsky. Come, the father says, don't worry, I'm going to come. Please, Abba, yes, don't worry, Donnie, I'm going to be there. And sure enough, the next night, there they are at 10 o'clock. The father's not there. 10:15, 10:25, and the boy is shedding tears. Where's my Abba? He doesn't care. Where is he? And it comes 10:30 and they're finally up to him and they usher him and the Rebbe inside. And his tears had soaked through the last few pages of that precious Heilige notebook. Because where's my Abba? My Abba couldn't come. And the Rebbe said, don't worry about it, dear Abba loves you. And still we're here with Chaim Kanevsky. And you're going to get a bracha and you're going to show him your choshev notebook. And he's introduced to Chaim Kanevsky Shlita and he takes out the notebook and Chaim. Not a simple buha, bracha v'atzlocha. This boy Donnie is sitting there as Rav Chaim asks to look at his notebook. And Rav Chaim turns those tear-soaked pages and he's reading every page through Parshas Vayigash. I'm sure it didn't take Rav Chaim very long. But Rav Chaim turns to the boy and he says, Donnie, ani ro'eh dvar mamitiyim. I see true words of Torah. I see emes kedusha. And I see it emanating from a pure and pristine neshama. Donnie's tears were far and gone by now. The Goda Hador loved his Chinuchei Torah. And then he hands the notebook back to Donnie. And he says, Donnie, telech liyeshiva. V'tihiyeh gadol hador. Now, I don't know about you, I've been by Rav Chaim many times. What I would pay to get such a bracha. I got to start working on those notebooks again. Dvar mamitim shebaumi leif tahor. Telech li shiva v'atatiyeh gadol hador. ChinuchAtzmai sells itself. Now you'll say, well, come on, I don't really know these boys and these girls, and someone's going to take care of them, someone's not going to take care of them if you don't take care of them tonight. If we don't pay for those Karen Hasa'ot, then we will not have those schools. And if we don't have those schools, it's not just talking about hundreds and thousands and tens of thousands of Dori Doris of Yidden. We're talking about perhaps the very next Golda Hador. Now, I don't know about you, but Bli Neder, I'm giving that $36 a month, and I hope to increase my pledge. Because if I don't know who it's helping, I know one person it's helping. I want to have a chelik in the Torah of the next Golda Hador. What are you waiting for? Join me and join Donnie. And let's produce many more Donnies. And let's put ChinuchAtzmai out of business by giving them all the money that they need. So, Reb Chaim, we thank you. We thank you, Donnie. Can't wait to see those precious pages of that notebook in a sefer one day. I want a chelik in his Torah and his Yiddishkeit. And I'm sure each and every one of you does as well. So what are you waiting for? ChinuchAtzmai, we're here to help. Yashakayach for coming tonight. Hatzlocha gedoyla ad ma'od. Siyata d'shmai baruchnius of agashmius. Let's all join these holy of the neshamas back in Atzenu HaKadosha. Once and for all, the end of the machlokes and the end of the sports, and we won't need the Super Bowls and we won't need the latest iPhones. Let's get back Be'ez Hashem Yisbarach B'mheira V'yameinu with Mashiach Tzidkenu, not just in the holy city of Baltimore HaKadosha, but in Atzenu HaKadosha B'mheira V'yameinu Get the Nacht, and a cult of Tamid Yishkai for coming, love and give to ChinuchAtzmai, Tiskel Mitzvahs of the cult of Selo Get the Nacht.